Another question facing America now is, do we have any kind of legitimate partner in President Karzai? The runoff election is coming up. Who knows who will win? But the whole political process is so shadowy. I mean, the election was apparently rigged initially. And so what kind of partner will we have in the government? And that question becomes even bigger now that the New York Times has reported today that Karzai's brother, Wali Karzai, is allegedly involved in Afghanistan's opium trade and that he's been getting regular payments from the CIA for the past 8 years. And one of the things he's been doing in return for those payments is helping to recruit an Afghan paramilitary force that would work on the side of the government and the U.S. So let's just talk about his brother first. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's long been rumored that his brother was part of the opium trade, and it's long been a sort of subject to debate within the U.S. military and the U.S. government as to what do we do about it. But I mean, I think it's part and parcel of trying to operate in these really damaged places like Afghanistan. You know, you're not going to have a government partner that's effective. You're going to have to deal with a lot of corruption, and it's not a black and white case where there are good guys and bad guys. I don't think anyone falls into either camp in Afghanistan. So you've got to figure out, well, who can I effectively work with without it so discrediting me in the eyes of the Afghan people that I'm ineffective? And that's the real challenge here. And there's no simple answer. And that will govern a lot in terms of how many troops do you think you can have? I mean, this is a flawed government, so a deeply flawed government. So how far can you realistically extend its reach?
So you're not shocked that the CIA has been paying Hamid Karzai's brother Wali, even though he's involved in the opium trade, allegedly?
No, I mean, it's long been known that he's suspected to have been in the opium trade, and it's long been known that he also provides a lot of intel to the U.S. government. So the fact that we're paying him for that intel, I guess, doesn't surprise me. You know, I mean, it is Afghanistan. You look in Iraq, part of the reason Iraq transformed was because we ended up paying folks who were working closely with al-Qaeda. I mean, these sheikhs out in Anbar province were our critical partners. I mean, they're mostly smugglers, not to put too fine a point on it, and they've been doing it for centuries. And this was something that I think General Abizaid would say, and is exactly right. We can't impose sort of our values and morals on these folks. In some ways, we've got to work with what we've got, and we've got to be more flexible. And we've got to sort of try any tricks that we can within reason. I think that's one of the things that the Army's really learned over the last several years is that look, you can't kill all the bad guys. You've got to figure out which ones you can work with and which ones you can't.
Let's talk about the bombing today in Pakistan. About 3 hours after Secretary of State Hillary Clinton arrived in Pakistan, in Islamabad, there was a bombing in Peshawar that killed more than 80 people. This was in a market. What does that attack say to you?
Well, I mean, you're going to have these bombings, and the bombs, I mean, you look at the ones in Iraq and the ones in Pakistan of late, they've gotten increasingly big, and the ability of these sort of extremist groups to inflict mass casualties has grown. I mean, I think Pakistan is the key, which I guess has sort of become a cliche in Washington, but not to put too fine a point on it, but I don't think we really care about Afghanistan but for the fact that it's next to Pakistan, which is a place that has nuclear weapons. So, I mean, that's a huge concern. I think to the extent that you have unrest and the Taliban expanding their havens in Pakistan, it makes your problem in Afghanistan exponentially harder. If you can get the Pakistani government to move on some of these Taliban havens to disrupt the Taliban over there, it makes your problem in Afghanistan significantly easier. So Pakistan's critical, not just because it's got nuclear weapons, but it also, I think, has a massive effect on what the realm of the possible it is in Afghanistan.
So, Greg, you've been covering the Army since 2000, since before 9/11. So when you look at the Army in 2000 and you look at the Army now, what are some of the biggest changes you see?
I mean, it's so massive that it's hard to capture sometimes. I mean, the biggest change is just how officers think of warfare. You know, the Cold War Army, the Army that we had in 2000 thought of warfare as these sort of big tank-on-tank battles. And war was almost an engineering exercise for them. It was how do you mass firepower, artillery, air, tanks, helicopters to destroy the enemy. I mean, this is an army that understands that war is about politics and culture and religion and extending governance. It's a completely different problem set. It's almost like you've taken an army of engineers and turned them into an army of history and religion professors. It's a bizarre and fundamental transformation.
And I guess the potential problem you see with that is that perhaps the Army has become too convinced that it's capable of changing people, of changing towns, of changing countries.
I think that's the worry. Look, we had the Powell Doctrine before, which says, hey, look, let's have limited, clear aims, use overwhelming firepower to destroy the enemy and get out. And that was a flawed vision, because you look at what happens when you do that and you get giant messes like Iraq or Afghanistan, where we moved in quickly, toppled the Taliban, and chaos ensued. On the other hand, not sure, the Petraeus Doctrine, which replaced it, which says, hey, you can do big kind of nation building. You can really change these places. I worry that skews us a little bit towards hubris in terms of what we can accomplish militarily. And the truth is somewhere between the two. I mean, I think the Petraeus Doctrine is a huge upgrade over what we had before in the Powell Doctrine. But it's also got, I think, significant dangers.
When do you plan on returning to Afghanistan?
I'd like to go back kind of after the strategy settled. We're in this weird sort of limbo right now, where we're not quite sure what we want to accomplish and how we want to accomplish it. So, I mean, my gut would be I'd like to, let us settle on a strategy, give it a month, and then sort of see where we are and whether what we've settled on is realistic and possible.
Greg Jaffe, thank you so much for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Greg Jaffe is the Pentagon correspondent for The Washington Post and co-author of the new book, The Fourth Star, Four Generals and the Epic Struggle for the Future of the United States Army.